From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and All India Radio, this is Stumped.
Hello and welcome to Stumped, your intercontinental hit of news, features and debate from the quirky world of cricket. I'm Alison Mitchell, back in England, bracing ourselves for Storm Eunice to hit as soon as I've stepped off the plane, pretty much. But also, Stuart Broad has expressed his frustration, confusion and anger at being left out of the England squad for the West Indies. We talked about that on last week's show. And he indeed, is not happy about his possible England future now as well. But also, imagine my surprise when I turned on the television to watch the IPL auction to see Charu Sharma in the hot seat. More on that to come.
Hello, it's Jim Maxwell from Sydney here, keeping an eye on the IPL auction and the guest auctioneer. Sheffield Shield cricket, Australia beating Sri Lanka in T20, and of course New Zealand off to a red hot start across the ditch against South Africa.
Well, hello both of you. I tell you why Stuart Broad is upset at missing out on their tour to the West Indies, because they've forgotten how to play cricket in India. It's turning out to be a terrible series for them. Much rather watch Sri Lanka because they're playing a reasonable brand. But yeah, there I was returning from the coffee plantation last week. You remember I did that show in Mysore. Somewhere along the way we stopped and I got back home. It was supposed to be an average, unremarkable weekend with the family. And then I get a phone call and then, what can I say? It led to some pretty dramatic scenes over the weekend.
So you weren't, Charu, at the auction anyway. I presumed that Hugh Edmeades sort of collapsed and thankfully he was okay and you just got sort of hauled straight up. How did it happen?
The shortest end is that I was at home having lunch with the extended family, and I got a call from Brijesh Patel, who's a friend of mine. Of course, he is the chairman of the IPL, but much more a friend from Bangalore, runs the Karnataka State Cricket Association for many years. He said, Charu, where are you? I said, at home. He said, can you get to the ITC Gardenia immediately? And I said, well, I suppose I could. What's the problem? He said, well, our auctioneer, unfortunately, just collapsed, had an incident. And so he said, you got just enough time to put on a suit and get here as quickly as you can, which I did. And then, one just sort of carried on, because it's like a little river that you immerse yourself in and just go with the flow. And I don't want to undermine or underestimate the auctioneer's job in a sporting scenario, but really it's pretty elementary, because the players are the center of attraction and you just have to go along the auction book. So it wasn't traumatic at all, but it seemed that a lot of people didn't really expect it of me. So, that was the funny part. But anyway, Alison, Jim, you know how it is. I mean, it's really about the players. And if you're in the auctioneer's seat, all you need to bother about is what's the next team coming up. And you don't really get carried away with the figures. It's all for the players. And it's all one fuzzy couple of days, because I don't remember who went to whom for how much, It was just
all right, that could be a problem for the next 5 minutes of this podcast.
No, well, I've done a little bit of homework before the show, so.
The most expensive buy, I won't put you on the spot, Charu, but India's Ishan Kishan, the wicketkeeper bat. He was bought by Mumbai Indians, who shelled out a whopping 15.25 crore, just over $2 million. Then we had England batter Liam Livingstone becoming the most expensive foreign player in this year's auction. He was signed by Punjab Kings for $1.5 million. Which team do you think has done the best out of it?
The whole purpose of this Tata IPL mega auction was the fact that there are two new teams, and how do we equally or provide all the teams with an equal opportunity with an equal purse. So that's the purpose of the auction, really. When it's a mature league later on, I'm sure that there'll be fewer and fewer auctions, or maybe none at all in the future. But to ensure that the two new teams had a similar go at the equitable distribution, that's why this big auction. And I think the purpose has been served, because players have been pretty evenly spread. Of course, the earlier teams did manage to get a few, and the new teams had the choice of getting a few players before the auction. But having said all of that, it does seem like some of the usual suspects, CSK, although it's an aging side, Mumbai Indians always pull out something out of their hat, and KKR are pretty well served once again.
Jim, it was really interesting to watch the Aussie cricketer Tim David join the Millionaires Club, because he was bought by Mumbai Indians for $1.53 million, which is more than the sale price of star names like David Warner and Pat Cummins. And we've had Tim on Stumped before, of course, if you remember, telling us a bit of his backstory. But yeah, what did you make of that signing, Jim?
Well, not all that surprising. I mean, we should give credit to his place of birth, who haven't performed brilliantly on the world stage as yet, but maybe it's going to happen. He was born in Singapore, but has spent most of his life in Perth, of course. And no doubt the Australian selectors will be having an even closer look at him as we move towards the T20 World Trophy later in the year. But there's no doubt he's the kind of player that can turn a game in a couple of overs. And it's his power hitting coming in at 5, 6, 7. He can come in anywhere, really. But, I mean, that's what we've seen since he first played with the Scorchers, then moved to the Hurricanes. And he's playing in the Pakistan Super League and making runs there. He's a devastating, very, very powerful hitter. Big, strong, 25-year-old, right hand, and on those small Indian grounds. Well, I think all T20 grounds are small now, aren't they? But they don't seem to have much trouble in clearing the boundary, and he excels at that. So have a look and see who he's playing for in another 7 or 8 months' time. He might all of a sudden, like Dirk Nannes did years ago, jump from the Netherlands to play for Australia. And although he's played for Singapore, clearly Australia will grab him if he continues to pound the ball like he's been doing. But even he must have been surprised. It's what I call the IPL, the lotto for an exclusive club. You're not too sure which player is going to get the best prize, but there's some good ones there. Liam Livingstone, wow.
Yeah, he's a big hitter, certainly, isn't he? But that's part of the intrigue, isn't it? Just who is going to pull out those big bucks? And sometimes it's surprising names who get the big bucks and surprising names who don't. I was a little surprised when we're talking about the names who missed out, Jim, that when you look down the list, some pretty big name spinners. So yeah, looking at Imran Tahir, Adil Rashid, Tabraiz Shamsi. Is this, do you think, just too much competition from Indian spinners? You know, when teams are looking at who to spend their money on for overseas players, they can actually do very well with their local talent and therefore reserve their overseas slots for more of the, the fast bowlers, the big finisher batters.
What's the quota, Charlie? How many overseas players are you allowed to play in any one game? 5?
4 in the 11.
But both of you make good points. One, of course, only 4 are allowed, and 2, yes, Alison, it's because of the fact that the local spinners obviously know local conditions so much better. That if you are to have spare, if I can use that term, overseas players, you can take 9 or 10 and only 4 are played. You want to pay a fair amount for 4 or 5 big stars, but you don't want to pay too much, and the base prices are fair anyway for overseas players. You don't want to pay too much for overseas players who are not likely to be getting a single game. So you kind of complete that quota, if you wish, of overseas players with just a few punts on some new players. But you can't really afford to have more than 5 well-paid overseas players.
So to finish off our chat, Charu, talking about player contracts, have you been signed up for next year? No disrespect to the incumbent.
Yeah, true. No, I have to say this once again. Hugh seems to be fine. I mean, it was a terrible tumble. And I'm not so sure they need to pay too much attention to auctions for the next 2 or 3 years because, as I said, there's not likely to be any mega auction. But all I can say is that, my number hasn't changed for many, many years. So if somebody wishes to give it a call, I'm happy to put on a suit and a tie and reach where it is. Yeah.
Next on the programme, we're going to head to Australia to speak with former Australia women's captain Alex Blackwell. Now, over the course of a 15-year international career, Alex captained her team to World Cup and Ashes victories. But away from the field, life did bring some challenges. Alex was never afraid to call out hypocrisy and challenge the traditional hierarchies of the game. And she became the first out female cricketer to play for the Australian national team. And she's been a big advocate for women and LGBTQ plus people in sport. Since retiring in 2019, Alex has continued her involvement in the game as a board member, commentator, and now author. Alex's new book, Fair Game, was published a couple of weeks ago, and I caught up with her to discuss finding her place in cricket and putting her story in writing. Al, it's really good to have you on to talk about your book. I'm interested, first of all, in really sort of, has it come out the way you wanted it to, and has it already had the reception that you hoped it would have?
It's turned out beautifully. I'm very happy with it. I think Megan Maurice, who I wrote it with, has done an expert job guiding me to, I guess get the tone right, because I didn't want it to be all about hardship and challenges, but there's plenty of stories around that and finding my place in cricket. But yeah, the joy of the game and the magic of the game as a kid, it was lovely to speak about that. And then also how the game has evolved over the time I was a part of the Australian team, so from amateur to professional, the charm of the amateur years, but then the impact of professionalism and how far the game's come.
Was it quite a difficult and emotional book to write, because you address all manner of subjects, from difficulties within the dressing room, challenging times in the dressing room, but your own sort of personal battles with your own sexuality when you're younger, and then within the cricket world as well. So it moves from the personal into the cricket and back out again. Was it difficult and emotional?
Yeah, look, it was difficult to relive some of the experiences. I guess I'm not alone when I say that I've experienced homophobia in sport. I think our game of cricket has come such a long way to acknowledge and celebrate the contribution of especially gay women, and hopefully more and more gay men can see that cricket's a place for them. We know that through the Out on the Field study that was done in 2014, 6,000 people participated from all around the world in this survey, and they were both gay and straight participants. 80% of them have experienced or witnessed homophobia in sport. So 80%, that's a big number. And, I think we've got a little bit more work to do, but it's come such a long way. And it's wonderful to see so many more players being free to be themselves. So look, yeah, it was difficult to relive some of the stories. But part of why I wanted to write the book was to process what had happened. A lot happened in my time in the game, 15 years playing for Australia. And there was an element of healing, I guess, going through that process and putting it down on paper and documenting that wonderful period of change. And our sport's opened its doors to so many more people now.
Has there been some response from those who've read your book and didn't perhaps realise some of the experiences you had in dressing rooms, from perhaps people who were there at the time, that it's maybe opened their eyes?
Well, maybe. I mean, the more I hear people responding to the book, mostly the comments have come from perhaps past players or gay women who aren't in cricket, but the stories resonated with them, that some of the things I stood up for and spoke out about, that they shared similar concerns or feelings or experiences, but weren't in a position to speak up. Generational change, society has changed now. So I was in a privileged position to be the first female cricketer to speak openly about these issues. But I think sports administrators will get a lot out of the book to understand the impact of perhaps outdated marketing strategies that once upon a time were acceptable but are no longer. Sports moved a long way, and also the fans that we're trying to target. They're different people these days as well, and they have different expectations.
This is one anecdote in the book that you tell, isn't it, where marketing contracts were awarded to a number of players who were perceived as the sort of typical, ideal, marketable cricketer, and you challenged that at the time. Can you just talk us through that particular experience?
Yeah, look, it was an experience whereby I, through my interactions with administrators in cricket, understood that they wanted to shift the image so that mothers might want to bring their daughters. And in saying that, it was highly offensive to someone like me, because what they were saying was that having gay women in the sport, out gay women, was not something they believed mothers would want their daughters to be around. And so to be told someone like me would not be a good role model was very hard to hear. So look, the marketing contracts at the beginning, that there were limited numbers, so not everyone could have one. But I felt that the same trap we were falling into, sort of marketing towards the male gaze of what the current, or at the time, the the fan base of cricket was. The fan base has changed and needs to change into the future so that our sport of cricket continues to be engaging for our younger populations who they want authentic stories. They want to see themselves reflected in their national teams. And I think the way that the game's promoted now, all women have, all the Australian players have marketing contracts, not just a few. And so all are sort of respected and remunerated for the promotional work that they do.
Do you think that the game does have enough diversity of thinking? Do you hope that a book such as yours and your continual advocacy will make the improves that you want to see?
I think, Ali, that when our national teams are reflective of our society, that'll tell us that we've got diversity of thought throughout our whole system. And that we will be encouraging from a grassroots level all the way through different types of people. So we want the talent pool to be as big as possible, and we don't want cricket. It was, I guess, built for men, played by men. Women invented overarm bowling, but it's come such a long way.
The first World Cup.
First World Cup. Look, I think it's the best sport, and I just think it's great if all people can feel like it's a place for them. And here in Australia, we should be seeing people of South Asian descent, our Sudanese population that's increasing, our Chinese population that's very strong. That should be reflected in our Australian team, and both men and women. It's not quite there at the moment. So that takes time, though. And wonderful to see some of our multicultural ambassadors, recent debutante Alana King, for example, who's done a wonderful job in the Ashes.
Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ali.
That's former Australia captain Alex Blackwell on the release of her book, Fair Game. So that is all we've got time for on this week's Stumped. My thanks to Jim Maxwell and Cherry Sharma, and to you for listening. We'll see you again next week. Until then, bye-bye.
From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and All India Radio, this is Stumped.